Okay, so I want to talk about the difference between education business. So a lot of people just, it's easier to like ask, oh, do you do tutoring? Or like, so we offer some tutoring services, but I wouldn't say we're like a tutoring center because sort of what the connotations of what a tutoring center is. We're like more like what I would say, why it's called a school of maths. Okay. So what are the connotations with tutoring? Well, okay, so tutoring, for a lot of people, like if you get behind, you go to tutoring to catch up. For some other people, you get tutoring good to go ahead. But it's usually like there's already a syllabus, so like there's like the school curriculum, and you're kind of like they're already sort of the master's already a school's curriculum, and they give you problems, and you kind of tend to grind a lot to sort of get good at the specifics of the curriculum. Okay. But a school, okay, even though the name school is kind of getting degraded a little bit as well, is not meant to do that. They're meant to be sort of the originator of the curriculum. Okay, so they're meant to lead in what is meant to be taught, and there's usually a culture surrounding a school that's not just purely the academic curriculum. Okay, but the problem these days, with especially more and more recently with public schools, is they're kind of just going with the grind of past papers and just trying to ace the test like the tutoring centers. So the problem with that is they're doing that and they're wasting a lot of the students' time during the day, and they're doing it much worse than tutoring centers are doing it. And they're in some sense they're justifying the existence of tutoring centers because the tutoring centers just do what they do but better. Okay. They do have private schools which have more of a culture that's independent of the cohort and the parents. They have their own school culture. They have their own values. But a lot of the times, the problem is people haven't really thought too logically about what those values actually mean. So I like to classify the values in terms of what's necessary and what's a priority. And a lot of times they become sort of conflated, and they are actually pretty much the same thing when they're missing. So like integrity is a common value, and integrity to me is not very important in the sense that everyone should have integrity. Okay, it's a necessary thing to have, but it does become important when you're in a world where no one has integrity. Okay, then that would actually make you stand out. But I think it's something I would actually expect from people to have integrity as opposed to someone who has integrity stands out from other people. Okay. Um, but there's lots of examples like that, and I don't want to go into them too much here. But so ideally, a school would have culture and also its own sort of academic program, and that's what we have at Dr. Marcus School of Maths. Okay, so we create our own curriculum that gets students good at maths fundamentally and without specializing in the exams, and then but they end up doing really well in the exams at the end. We specialize a bit towards the end. Okay. Um, so what about just like the education and business side? Well, what is a business? A business generally just gives people what they want. Okay, that's sort of the easiest way to do business. Whereas education is a little bit different, okay? Because education is kind of like when you're educating little kids, right? You can't just give them what they want all the time because they don't know what's good for themselves. Okay, so education, there's a little bit of maybe a little bit of condescending in the sense that like I'm saying I know better, what's better for you than what you would know is better for you. But in some sense that's also true, right? I actually do know what's better for your education, and I do consider the student's full education and not just sort of one exam or one particular stat line. And and that kind of does get in the way of business, okay? Because it's so much easier just be like, oh, what do you want? You want that? Okay, just enroll in this, this, and this, and we'll just take money, give you that. But then that's not meaningful. So for most people, I think that's easy to do, and you make a lot of money. But for me, it feels like a con, yeah, because I understand. I feel like I understand a bit better, and I think that that's not a meaningful way to do business. It definitely goes against my statement of purpose, and I think it's ultimately bad for the student. So what my vision for the business is kind of like the old school hotel vision, where like you don't want to you never really want to pay too much for a hotel. You don't really know what you're getting into. Maybe like the company pays for you, and then you end up staying there, But then you realize you have all these perks and benefits you never even expected, and they're amazing, right? And you feel like you had a really great experience. And this is kind of the same thing with education. You really just, you kind of, for me, you put the money into our program and you have trust in what we do. And you might not have to understand exactly what we do, but by the end, you'll be surprised by the things that you can get out of it. Okay. Um, and sometimes what you get out of it is not actually what you want. Like, so you want someone to like, maybe make the IMO team or get really good in maths extension two. But um, even if you make that, sometimes people just become hollow vessels, right? I mean, the reason those things are sought after is because those things are meant to represent a certain competence and ability, maths ability in people, right? But if you actually subvert those competences and abilities and go straight for that result, then you're really just scamming other people and saying you have certain qualities that you don't, right? Okay. And so we're at our school, maybe we need to even change the name because schools aren't really living up to this name anymore. But we're really trying to create not just people who are ultimately successful at the exams in the end, which they all are, but we want the cause of that success to be a certain level of competence and achievement in education. Okay, so we want that, and that comes from also building a community and a culture, and just generally being very engaged in the long term betterment of ourselves. Okay, and yeah, for some reason, this idea, it's like one of those ideas, if you have to explain it, maybe you'll never understand, right? But I feel like it's been way too long since I've tried, and I'm starting to sort of get overwhelmed by sort of the opposite culture influencing what we do. Okay, it's gotten to the point where like, um, it's people actually think like they know best, and like, and that's how they get it. But we've never had anyone really achieve better results, um, even um in the things where we're jointly competing in, just going for the shortcut. And so not only have we achieved the better results, we've achieved everything else that was sacrificed to get to that, which would have been a real shame. And sometimes you don't make the team or you don't get the result, then you have nothing else left. But for the other approach, you have a really great backup, and that backup is what's going to get you through life. It's the education, the ability, and the competence. Okay, it might not come through in a particular exam for whatever reasons. Maybe the problems were particularly strange, or for you weren't very suitable. But there's going to be more exams where you are going to do very well. Okay, so okay, I think I've talked a bit too long, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say.